Pleasure to welcome each of you to a discussion today on the repositioning of our public housing portfolio, specifically our scattered sites using the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. At this time, I'll turn it over to Cindy Herrera, who is Columbia Housing's SVP of Development, to provide you all with an update on our redevelopment efforts. Cindy?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Many of you are on the phone, but we have a PowerPoint that we're going to go through to talk a little bit about the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. This will be available later on our YouTube channel and on the website. I'm going to ask Lee Roberts to do a little bit of housekeeping for us before we get started. So Lee, if you could do that, please. Thank you.
Sure. Welcome, everybody. Just a couple of things. We are recording, like Ms. Herrera said, and we will have this on our YouTube channel, the Columbia Housing YouTube channel, probably within the next 24 hours. There will also be a written version of the question and answer portion of the show today that will be available within the next couple of days. That said, we will be keeping everyone on mute during the meeting. If you have any questions at all, please put them in the chat box. The chat box you can locate at the bottom of your screen through the toolbar, and just type that in there, and we will forward those to Ms. Herrera at the end of the show, and she will give answers to all of those things. Again, if you've got any questions, just drop those in the chat. And thank you again for being here.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So today we're going to talk about the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. And we're talking specifically about our scattered site properties. And what we refer to as our scattered site properties are 18 small communities that are located throughout the city. I've put a list of them up here on the PowerPoint for those of you who can see it, but I'll just run through them real quick. This is for Archie Drive, Arsenal Hill, Atlas Road, Celia Saxon, Congaree Vista, The Corners, the Elderly Cottages, Fontaine Place, Greenfield, Pinewood Terrace, Fair Street, Overbrook Thornwell, Pine Forest, Rosewood Hills, Rosewood Senior, Waverly, Willerhill, and Yorktown. So these are the 18 communities that make up a group of housing that we refer to as scattered site properties because they're scattered throughout the city of Columbia. Assistance Demonstration Program. It is a demonstration program that was implemented by HUD in 2012. What RAD does is it removes the properties from the public housing program, and it provides project-based Section 8 contracts for the properties. The purpose of RAD is to improve the properties either through rehabilitation or new construction. So why are we doing RAD, and why did HUD create RAD? Basically, a few years ago, HUD did an assessment of all the public housing across our entire country. And what they found is that there was more than $60 billion in deferred maintenance that needed to be done at these properties and in repairs. And HUD refers to these repair costs as capital needs. So we have over $60 billion across the country in capital needs. The reason that we have such a high amount of capital needs is because historically, Congress has not provided enough money for housing authorities to be able to keep up with these capital needs. So as a result, we've had to make tough decisions like deciding whether we need to repair roofs or plumbing, or in some cases, in having to demolish public housing. What RAD does is it gives us a mechanism or a way in which we can rehab or repair or rebuild units without having to try to wait for Congress to give us the money to do so. So what does RAD mean to you as a tenant? Basically, it means that you will not lose your housing assistance and you will not have to be rescreened because of a RAD conversion. So you are guaranteed a right to remain in your unit or return to a unit if you do have to temporarily move. So even though RAD property allows us to go out and access private money to make repairs, it's still going to receive subsidy from HUD, and that subsidy from HUD is going to be in the form of the voucher program. So we will continue to own and manage your properties through the project-based voucher program. The RAD does require that when we convert the properties from public housing to the RAD program, they still are owned or controlled by either a public or a nonprofit organization. This chart here just kind of shows us about what do properties look like before RAD and what happens after we complete the RAD conversion. So before RAD, the properties, as I'm at 100%. So we don't receive all of the funding that we are entitled to receive. What happens when we convert to RAD, the properties now go to a long-term contract under the project-based voucher program, and then the properties have a more stable funding platform. Under public housing, as I mentioned, we cannot go out and borrow money to perform repairs. When we convert your housing from public housing to the project-based voucher platform, we now can go out into the private market. We can go to banks, to lenders, to investors, and we can secure money to be able to make the repairs on your units. As we mentioned, the funding that we currently receive from Congress is not enough to keep up with the deteriorated conditions. When we convert to RAD, we're able to access this private money, which allows us to be able to make the repairs and overall improve the conditions of the housing units. And then finally, currently as public housing, you cannot move anywhere else without losing your assistance. Currently, you have to live in a public housing units in order to get rental assistance. If you move out of public housing, the assistance does not go with you. What happens in RAD is that after 1 year of living in a RAD unit, you are able to request a tenant-based voucher. And this is called choice mobility. You go on a choice mobility list and you actually get a priority to get a voucher over people off of the other regular waiting list. So how does RAD affect your rent? This is always a question that every tenant asks us. And basically it has very minimal impact. The voucher program calculates the tenant rent just like the public housing program does. So your rent will still be based on 30% of your income. So most of you will not have a rent increase. However, if you are paying a flat rent in public housing, it is possible that you could have a gradual rent increase. In these cases, if your rent increases by more than 10%, and you have to pay more than $25 per month, then that rent would be phased in over a 3-year period instead of being increased all at one time. Now, one of the things we want to tell you is that the RAD process takes a little bit of time. This just kind of shows the process here, but we estimate that it takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years from the beginning to the end. The strategic planning, which is what we've done already, we've gone out and we've looked at all of the properties. And we've determined what needs to be done, or we're working on figuring out the scope of work for each property. Today is just the beginning of this process. We're required to conduct meetings with the residents before we can submit a RAD application. And so this is the first meeting. We will be holding a second meeting as well. But basically, we will go through this process and then we'll be able to submit the RAD application. We anticipate submitting the RAD application sometime around the first part of November. It'll go to HUD. HUD will review the application, and then we receive something called a CHAP, which is just a commitment that says you can go forward with RAD. And then we have to go through this lengthy process of doing a financing plan and getting to closing, and then we'll be able to start the rehabilitation construction on the units. So the next steps is, first of all, do not move. Nobody should move at this point in time. Nobody's required to move. This is simply the beginning of the process for us to be able to tell you about the RAD program and to share with you the fact that we are going to submit a RAD application for the housing units in which you live. As we go through this process, we will schedule additional meetings. We'll provide you with written materials, and we'll keep you informed of all of the plans. Now, as you saw at the beginning of this presentation, we have 18 different properties that are part of this scattered site. So all of your properties will be done at a little bit different timing. And so we will be working with all of you as a group to share this general information, but then we'll be working with each individual property as we start to move forward in the process. So we'll continue to do that and we'll work with you. So I'm going to end the formal PowerPoint presentation, and Ms. Roberts is going to field questions, and she's going to let me answer the questions, and hopefully we'll get a lot of your questions answered today. And as I said, we'll be having more meetings to share more information with you as we go through this process. So I'm going to open it up for questions now. And go ahead, Lee, if you would start to field the questions. We've got a couple of hands raised and some things in the chat.
And in the chat, Ms. Herrera, we have, and there may have been a typo on a letter. It says that the letter that they got in the mail said the next meeting is October 19th. Actually, the next meeting for this group is the 26th. So yeah, that was a little typo. But the 26th is the correct date.
Right, and we'll get out another notice to just let everybody know exactly what the date is, but it is on the 26th. We will have a second meeting with you on October the 26th.
Right. We'll also send out the text message and e-blast like we did today, which I think was helpful because it looks like we've got a lot of good participation. If you've got questions, we're going to ask if you would put them in the chat. So if you've got your hand raised, if you could put that question in the chat, that would be good. One of the questions that I'm getting over text and a couple things I got in email before the meeting started, can you talk a little bit about the moving process itself? So when the time gets here for that, will I need to move myself? Will the housing authority help? What's the process there?
Now, as I mentioned, we have 18 different little properties here. Some of you will have to move depending on the level of rehab that we're going to do. Some of you will not have to move. So it will be on a property by property basis that we let you know. If you do have to move, we anticipate that they will be temporary moves. You will move for a short period of time while we make the repairs in your unit, and then you'll move back into your unit. Some of you have properties that are in better condition than others. Some of you that are in properties or are in properties that aren't in very good condition, then we will be handling those in a different way, and you may have to move, or you'll have an option to possibly move in other ways. If you do have to move, I want to assure you that we will handle all of the move. There will be no cost to you. We will basically provide you with packing materials. We'll have professional movers that will do the moving. We will assist you in the unit that you're going to move to. If it's a temporary unit, we will in fact provide you with that temporary unit where you will have to move. We're going to try as much as possible to move people within existing units. So you might temporarily move to another small property until your unit gets done, and then you'll come back to your unit as much as possible. Or I should say you'll come back to an appropriate size unit based on your family size.
And that was one of the questions too, was that where are we going to be moving to? And you kind of addressed that there. Sounds like it's going to be a mixed bag, that there could be a lot of different options for folks as the process gets started.
That is correct. Again, we're talking about 18 different properties. So ideally what we'd like to do is, we'll have a phased construction. So there'll be, 2 or 3 properties that'll be done in the first phase, and then we'll go to the second phase, and then we'll go to the third phase. And so as we're doing the phases, we will, try to vacate people in the first few units, do those units, and then move people back to a completed unit, and then we'll go on to the next unit. So it will be, we anticipate that this will be a phased process, and based on the number of units, it could very well be about a 24-month construction period before we were able to get all of the units completed.
Gotcha. Now, Ms. Herrera, we've got a tough question, and this is one of those things that we've addressed at one of the other meetings. We know we've got deferred maintenance. We know we've got units that are in tough shape. We've got somebody who's says her apartment is non-livable. What should somebody do in that situation?
If you have severe problems currently with your unit, please contact your property manager right away and share that with your property manager, and then we will take a look at your unit. If you need to move before we get the RAD process started because of the condition of your unit, we will make arrangements for you to be able to make that move early. Otherwise, we will be moving people as we begin the rehab process down the road.
Great. Well, in this again, they all sort of play into each other. Are we going to provide reasonable accommodations for folks that need those during the move-in process?
Absolutely. Anybody who needs a reasonable accommodation, we will make sure that we locate a unit for you that is appropriate for what your special needs are. And we will make arrangements to assist you with anything that you need assistance with, including packing and unpacking and anything else that you may need assistance with.
Okay, that's great. Here's another question that we heard at some of the other meetings, but as far as my lease goes, do I need to stay in good standing? Should I keep paying rent? Very
good question. Very important. These continue to be public housing units, and they will be until we go through the conversion process. And you do have to remain in good standing. You have to comply with your lease, and you have to pay your rent and follow all the traditional lease requirements. That's important so that you will be eligible for any housing options at the time that we get HUD approval to proceed with the RAD process.
Yeah, so that's a really important point for everybody to know. Got a question coming from one of the folks over at the elderly cottages. Do we anticipate having to relocate the residents in those units? Those are the cottages behind Oak Reed.
Likely, we will be able to do whatever repairs are needed. Right. Those are newer units, so we anticipate that we will be able to do the repairs at those units without having to move residents. And like I say, the architects are actually finishing up the scope of work and the specifications as we speak. Some of you may have seen an architect out at your house recently, and if not, you may see them very near in the future as we're looking at all of the units. But I anticipate that the elderly cottages will be work that we could do while people are in the unit. If we do find out later that we're not able to, again, we would probably try to move people just temporarily, maybe for 3 or 4 weeks while we do the repairs, and be able to put you right back in your unit.
Okay, I got a question on text. If my children are in school and I want to stay in the area where I am, will you be able to accommodate me staying in the same area so my children aren't disrupted during their school year?
We will make every effort to keep everybody in the area of where their children are in school. Again, it's going to depend on the level of work that has to be done on your particular property. If it's major work, then we may have to find you someplace else and make arrangements with the school district for your children to stay in that school while the work is underway. And so we will have a lot of options available to you to be able to, look at how we can best meet everybody's needs.
Great. I know that you've talked in general about some timelines, but folks want to know, should I start getting ready? Should I start looking for units? Should I start shopping for new furniture?
Do not do anything right now. Okay. As I mentioned, this is a somewhat lengthy process, and this is just the first step. Before we can even submit the application to HUD, we have to conduct 2 meetings with all of the residents. Today is just the very first meeting. When we have our next meeting on October the 26th, at that time, we'll share with you a little bit more information about the type of work that we're going to be doing. Again, we have 18 different properties here, and each property will have a little bit different level of work. Some of them are in pretty poor condition. Some of the other properties are in pretty good condition. And so it will really vary depending on the particular small property that you live in as to the amount of work that we have to do. But I can't stress enough that no one should move at this point in time. No one is going to be required to move. We will be doing each of the smaller properties individually. And once we come up with the detailed schedule for each property, we will then meet with your individual properties, the smaller properties, on a smaller basis, and we'll be able to share that with you. But our general timeline is that we hope to have the application submitted to HUD in November. We anticipate that we'll get HUD's preliminary approval probably sometime by February of next year. And then at that point, we will begin putting together what's called the financing plan, how we're going to do all the repairs. finalize the specifications, get the pricing from the contractors. So it will probably be late summer of next year before we start any type of construction. So we're close to a year away. And it's just, this is the process that HUD requires, that we have to meet with you very early in the process so we can share with you that we are going to submit the application and what the process will look like as we go through this lengthy process.
Okay, we've got some questions popping up in the chat. This is a two-part question. Will we have to pay rent in the location that we're moved to? And is that going to change the amount of rent that we pay now? Which also kind of ties into
your rent will continue to be, okay.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. We got a little delay. Answer that and then we'll go on.
Yeah, your rent will continue to be based on your income. So your rent will always be 30% of your income. If your income changes, obviously your rent will change. When you move to a temporary place, you will still be under your public housing lease, and you'll just have a temporary sublease. And so you will be required to pay your portion of the rent during the entire process. That is a requirement.
So that'd be the same rent that I'm paying now?
Provided your income doesn't change, that's correct.
Right. The second part of this young lady's question was, will the lights be on in the resident's name? Will utilities be transferred to the temporary unit, or will those stay? Will housing pay for those?
Again, I want to stress that it will depend on the level of work. If you're going to be out of your unit a very short period of time, say 4 to 6 weeks, the utilities will stay on in your name. And then when you return, we will reimburse you for the cost for the period of time you were not in your unit. If you're going to be out of your unit for an extended period of time, then we will probably transfer the utilities. And again, that's going to vary for each and every property because the properties are also different.
Gotcha. Somebody asking about Fair Street in particular, what degree of repairs do we foresee at that location? And do we think residents are going to have to move from Fair Street?
At our next meeting, we want to make sure you join us on October the 26th. At that meeting, we will provide you with a little bit more information about the work that's going to be done at each property. Right, okay. Today, we're not prepared quite to provide that. The architect is still doing the final review of all the properties.
This is a teaser meeting then today. We want you to come back for episode 2 in a couple of weeks.
That's right.
So somebody's asking, so if this is this like Section 8, can somebody get a house possibly through this program?
Okay. Once we convert it to RAD, the properties become what's called project-based vouchers, which mean that the voucher is tied to the building, not to you as a person. But as I mentioned, after 1 year, so let's say we finish all the construction and now you're living in the new unit, you're living in what's called a project-based voucher unit. After 1 year of living in that unit, you can request a tenant-based voucher. You will be put on what's called a choice mobility waiting list. And when vouchers become available, you will get a voucher before any regular waiting list. So you will have a preference to get a voucher before other people, but a voucher does have to become available. When you get a tenant-based voucher, at that time, you could search for another location, and it could include a house if that's what you chose to look for, as long as it meets the voucher program requirements.
Great. So will rent change at the properties that are renovated after the repairs and the renovations have been done, or will it remain the same as it was at the property pre?
Right. Again, the voucher program calculates rent in the same way that public housing does. It's based on 30% of your monthly adjusted income. But the public housing program has what's called a flat rent. So if you are on a public housing flat rent, your rent could change because the voucher program does not have a flat rent. So under the voucher program, your rent will always be 30% of your income, where in public housing, if your income is higher, you may be paying a flat rent. So it's possible for some of you, your rent could change, not for everybody. And in fact, for most people, there will not be any change in rent. It will only be for those families that are paying a flat rent in the public housing program.
Okay. Now, got somebody asking, will work just be on exteriors, or are we going to be doing renovations on the interiors of units as well?
We will be doing a lot of work on the interior of the units, and more in some units than in others. But generally, we will be doing work on the interior of the units in all properties. Again, the amount of work that we do will depend on the property, but we anticipate doing work on all units in the interior.
Great, great. If anybody else has any questions that they want to drop in here in the chat, that would be great. We're at about 4:30, so we've got time for a few more. No, everybody is excited about this process, Ms. Herrera, and the timeline is always one of the first things people are excited about. So I know that's heavy on everybody's mind. They're anxious to know what their units are going to look like and how quickly they can start moving into the new places.
Right. And obviously, as I said, that takes a little while, but it'll be here before we know it because time goes so fast. So we will be, like I say, finalizing all the plans over the next several months, and we'll be in communication with you. We'll have another meeting on October the 26th, and we'll share a little bit more with you at that time about what we're going to do at each property. And then after that, it'll kind of be quiet for a while we submit everything to HUD. And then starting next year, we'll keep you informed of exactly what's going on with each property and what the timeline will be.
We do have a couple more that have popped up. Are we going to give folks that do have to move a list of places where they're able to go, or is that going to be pretty much set once as we're phasing the work like you were describing earlier?
Right. If you're moving temporarily, we will have a unit that you will go to on a temporary basis. If you have to move for a longer period of time, then we will provide you with options, but we will always provide you with options of where you can move to. And one of the things that's important to remember is that you will move back to the property. As I said in the beginning, under RAD, all tenants have certain protections, and those protections include a guaranteed right to return. And basically, once you return to the property, then basically you will return to a unit. You may not necessarily go back to the exact same unit that you were in before, but you will be guaranteed a unit at the property.
Okay, okay. Got somebody asking if they had a washer and dryer in their unit before the renovation started, will washers and dryers still be in units after the renovations are complete and people move back?
If you currently have a washer and a dryer, yes, we will provide a washer and a dryer. If you do not currently have one, we are working very hard with the architect to try to figure out how to provide a washer and a dryer. There are some units where it's just physically going to be very difficult to do that. But in most cases, we're trying very hard to make sure that the units will have a washer and a dryer.
Yeah, getting a couple questions about those because somebody is saying that in her garden style apartment, will spaces be made available for washers and dryers?
Again, we're looking at, because all of your properties are so different, each property is going to be different in what we can do. But we are trying very hard with all of the new renovations that we're doing across our entire public housing portfolio, that we're trying to put washer and dryers in all of the units. There may be a few units that is not possible because of the way they're constructed. We in a dryer, but we're trying very hard and working with the architect to make sure we have washers and dryers in all the units.
Ms. Herrera, I've got somebody that's just going back to one of the situations where we know we've got units that have issues. This person says that she's been out of her unit for about 3 weeks because it's non-livable due to some water damage. What should she do? So she's taken care of. She should be working very closely
with her property manager. And if she can't return to her current unit, we will offer her another unit at this time, but she needs to be working very closely with her property manager to make sure that she can get in her unit.
Okay, yeah, and I just got, just for that person that put that in here, one of the property managers is going to be working directly with you on that. So hopefully we can get that resolved. Now, somebody who's been in their unit for about 12 years, she wants to make sure that all the units are going to be checked and thoroughly vetted to make sure that they're in good shape. Can we offer some assurances about that?
Yeah, once we start the construction, we will have construction folks that will inspect every unit before we accept the unit from the contractor. So once we start the construction, we will then work with every single unit will have what we call a punch list, or where it's someone from the housing authority on the construction side will walk through those units along with the architect before that contractor gets paid. So yes, every unit will be double checked and triple checked.
Is there any chance that we'll be adding bathrooms to downstairs units, to downstairs in units if there's no downstairs bathroom?
Right. We will be looking at where we can add bathrooms or half baths. Again, each unit, each of the properties of these 18 different properties, they're all very unique. And so we'll be kind of going through that and trying to determine what we can do with each property as we move forward.
Right.
Any other questions? These have been great questions that you all have asked. And I want to again make sure that any information today that you share with your neighbors if they were unable to join us today. So we'll look forward to getting back with you on the 26th and sharing a little bit more information. And then we'll be able to submit our application to HUD. And then once HUD approves it, we'll circle back with everybody again. And, we're working right now with the architects, and then we'll put together the scope of work, and we'll work with the contractors. And so all of those things will be things that we will do. And so, as I mentioned, we've talked a lot about the interior. We will also be doing exterior things. We want the properties to look good from a curb appeal standpoint. So we'll make sure that, there'll be some landscaping done in some cases. There'll be some sidewalks. There'll be, different things that are done depending on each individual property. Now, it's important that I point out that we will have things that have to be done because the architect has to, go through and identify what has to be done. And then we'll have a very big wish list of things we want to do and would like to do. And then the budget will dictate how much of that wish list we can accomplish. So, there isn't unlimited funding, but we do hope to have some good funding to be able to do this project. And like I say, each property will be a little bit different in what we're doing.
We've got somebody else who's got an issue where she's been out of her unit and because of some issues in there and needs the list of properties. We'll make sure that the property manager and the regional get in touch with you. And the last question was about, will the meeting on the 26th be the same time as today? And that is, yes, it will be. And we will send out another reminder by text for that meeting.
Yes, that is correct. It'll be at 4 o'clock on October the 26th.
Will there be hookups for electric vehicles?
No, we have not planned hookups for electric vehicles at this point in time. That's a desirable thing, and certainly it's something we could possibly look at, but right now we do not have any plans for any electrical hookups for vehicles. Charging stations, they refer to them as. We're hoping that as electric vehicles become more popular, there'll be public charging stations located around the city.
One couple last here questions coming in too. Are we going to add walk-in showers in the senior units for elderly residents?
That's probably something that we definitely will do. We've been on all of our new senior buildings. We are not putting tubs in. We are only doing showers. And so as we look at our existing senior buildings, we're also looking at how to retrofit them to make them a little bit more adaptable for seniors as they age.
And again, someone who says she's been calling in work for significant amount of time and nothing's been done. What should somebody do in that situation before the renovation starts?
If you have any immediate needs, please contact your property manager and make sure that your property manager is aware of what they are, and just continue to call if you don't get a good response so that your items can be taken care of. That's the thing I want to continue to stress.
Great.
All right. If not, thank you all very much for joining us today. This was really important information that we wanted to share with you. And as I mentioned, this is the very beginning of the process. So nobody should be concerned at this time. We want you to continue to share with us concerns and any questions that you have. As Ms. Roberts mentioned, this information will be available on the Housing Authority website as well as on our YouTube channel. And I will thank you once again and turn it back over to Ms. Bean.
Thank you, Cindy. Great, lots of great questions. Thank you all so much again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you all again on October the 26th at 4 p.m. You all enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.